from In Between the Lines. We're here with Christie. Christie, you want to introduce yourself and your book
Okay.
to the viewers?
Okay. My name is Christie Powell. I write fantasy mostly for young adults. All of these are in the same series, or at least in the same world, and it's fun to see how things tie together and play with history and just. So they're all in the same fantasy world, and I just have fun with it.
Okay. Now, for the viewers who maybe read one of your stories or are starting to read, give us a little background about yourself. Now, you said you're from California, right?
Mm-hmm. I was born in Victorville, California, but I always say Apple Valley because that's where I grew up and it's prettier. I just missed the prettier name by like 3 miles. But anyway, so I grew up in Southern California. I lived in the Western United States my whole life. I went to college in Brigham Young University, BYU, in Utah. And so I've been in the Western United States, and you can see those landscapes in my books a lot.
Okay. Now, when you mentioned landscape, that's actually really good because you mentioned that you actually have a degree in wildlife conservation, right?
Yes.
What inspired you to get that? Like, what was that important to you?
I always loved animals as a kid and hiking and being in wild places. And it's just something that has always caught my attention.
Okay. Now, I actually share that with you because when I was in Alaska, seeing the salmon and the habitat and how it could be endangered so easily, it's important to let people know. And it's funny that you bring that into your stories, and you want to let people know how important it is. Is that correct?
There are elements of that.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned that you have animals. You have ducks, and you have.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I'm a hobby farmer, so I have milking goats at home as well as lots of different types of poultry. I really like birds, so we have chickens, ducks, geese, guinea fowl.
Okay. Now, for those who maybe have not read your stories, can you give us an overview of the genre of your book? You mentioned that you world build, right? You build your own world in the stories. Can you give us a little info on that?
Okay. So I write fantasy, which means I get to make up stuff. That's
Now, this is your first book, right?
yes.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about this world?
Okay. So the world in all of the stories really is just one continent, which basically takes the same landscape of our modern world. And then I've been playing with the timeline. So these ones would be analogous to about the 1700s
Which
in our
is
world.
the first 3, right?
Yeah, these 3.
Okay.
This one takes place several centuries earlier. And then when I do more, most of them will still be in the same world, but at different times.
Oh, okay.
So playing with how the culture would be different based on different times and places in history.
Okay. Now, are these books self-published, or did you go the traditional way?
They are self-published.
How has been your experience with self-publishing?
It's been good. I enjoy doing things on my own. Even as a kid, when we'd play pretend, I'd always be the one going, "You're messing up the story. It has to be my way." So when I write, I have to. I like being able to do the editing, do the covers.
You like to be in control
yeah,
of the
like
different.
to do
Yeah. And then you actually, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned something important, that with self-publishing, the whole industry is changing.
Mm-hmm.
What have you noticed in the last decade?
I haven't been writing quite that long, but it's been fun to watch the changes. You go from ebooks have become big, we start to see audio, there's different ways of marketing, blogs come and go, different sites and social medias come and go. It's a fast changing market, and it's really fun to watch and try to figure out.
Right, and you mentioned audiobooks. That's really big now because a lot of people are on the go, they're traveling, and they use that time instead of sitting in an airport. They can listen to an audiobook. So audiobook it's been going up a lot. Now, in your personal life, do you have a time where, let's say, you devote to writing like some writers, or do you just as you go?
I am a mom with a farm and a family and a husband in school. So some of it's just wherever I can shoehorn things in. I try to wake up and have an hour before everyone else wakes up, and then I'll have nap time when the kids are asleep where I can get a chunk done, and then usually I'll have a small chunk after they go to bed as well.
Well, I don't think you're alone. I think a lot of moms out there You know, they have this bug about writing, and you know, they like to, but like you mentioned, you have your responsibilities with your kids, you have the farm. I like how your husband was last. I'm sure he'll appreciate that. But you're not alone. There's many people who, you mentioned, you have to find the time, and I believe you mentioned that you make like an hour in the morning, and then you have nap time, and then you know, every day is different, but you try to do that. And that has helped you to advance your writing along?
I'm in a writers group, or an online association called Night Writers Association.
Okay.
The idea being it's mostly moms, and we sneak it in at night.
Right. And yeah, like I mentioned, you're not the only one, and it's a good, and what I've been hearing is that when you're in a group setting, it helps you because it motivates you. You're not by yourself. You don't feel alone. Even if you're writing at home by yourself, you don't feel like you know, you have this group dynamic behind you, and it helps you. Also, besides writing, you mentioned that you do craft, you do other things, right? Can you give us a little bit of info on that?
I just like to make things, usually toys or things that are small, so I can finish it just in the afternoon. Teach it to my kids sometimes, have a few minutes before things get too crazy. So I do crochet, some painting. We recently discovered pistachio shells and how you can glue them together in different ways. So
Right.
we just have fun.
You incorporate that into the painting? Kind of like a more, yeah, okay. Now, you have a total of 5 books, right?
Yes.
Is there more on the way? Are you working on something
Yes.
right now?
These 3 are all in one series. It's eventually going to be 6 books, so there's 3 more in that series. And then I'll have...
Without giving us too much, you mentioned there was an exiled princess, right?
Yes.
And without giving us too much, you want to...
Sure. It's about an exiled princess who's trying to get her kingdom back. So each book is in a different kingdom. There are 6, and the magical abilities of the people depend on which kingdom you're from.
Okay. And then, besides the 3 more that you have coming for that, are you working on maybe in a different series? Are you starting something?
I'm working on some standalones like this one that also take place in the same world at different times.
Is it connected to this story, or? Okay.
I mean, it's centuries earlier, so none of the characters are the same, obviously.
But it's the same world.
It's the same world, the same magic, although people view it differently.
Okay. Now, for maybe somebody who's starting to write, somebody, whether, regardless of the age, whether somebody who's young or older, what recommendation would you give them or advice about starting to write?
Well, the main thing is just to practice a lot. So work on writing a whole lot, just whenever you can. The first things you write might not be publishable. That's perfectly okay. It's
Right.
not a waste of time. It's not wasted effort. So it's just like when you're playing the violin or whatever.
Right.
It's not a waste if you practice.
Right. That's good advice, because sometimes you get disappointed or you get discouraged. You're like, you know, maybe it's not that good. But practice will make it better, right? Okay. Anything else that I missed about your stories as far as something that you want to let the viewers know?
I don't think so.
Okay. Other than, let's say, when you were starting to write, were you inspired by any other writers or any type of genre? You know, what is your inspiration as far as?
I have a process where usually it'll start with a dream or something, and then I'll daydream about it for a while, just playing with the characters, and eventually a story will, like an actual plot will emerge,
Right.
and then, so it goes from dream to daydream to an actual plot, and then I write it down and it's an actual story.
You know, that's really interesting, because for what I've been noticing, every writer has a different technique. You know, I know somebody said that they just go with the flow and they write whenever they feel like it. You mentioned you have an actual time structure, but your ideas come way before that. You may dream the idea and then you play with the idea, right, until you come up with something. That's really interesting, and that's motivation for, you know, especially people who sometimes they don't know what direction to write or, you know, where to go with. So that's really good inspiration. We'd love to have you back when we finish the other 3. That way we can, the complete series, and we can talk about it. In the meantime, anything you want to let your viewers know, or people who are going to start reading it?
Just keep writing, it's a lot of fun, and keep reading, that's a lot of fun too.
All right. Well, Christy, thank you for being here today, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.